We've been super fortunate to spend the last year and a half living full-time in our van, and through that have ridden a bunch of new trails.
And today we're gonna give you 5 tips that we found really helpful when trying out a new trail for the first time. And we just so happen to be at a completely new trail to us, Rancho La Costa Habitat Conservation Area in San Marcos, California. Now, before we do that, we're so close to hitting 1,000 followers on YouTube. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please take the time to do this now.
Tip number 1 is to get familiar with the map. And there's a couple ways that you can do this, but the way that we've found most reliable is to use an app on your phone, because not all trailheads will have a map like this, and most trails that we've ridden are not marked very well once you get away from the map. The map that we use most is MTB Project, and that's worked pretty well for most of the trails we've ridden, but we are finding more and more often that MTB Project is not as well kept up as Trailforks. Now, Trailforks sadly is not free for the mobile version. You have to get a subscription. So the kind of hack that we found is we'll get on Trailforks on our PC, check out the trail system, maybe take a screenshot or two, and then use MTB Project to kind of fill in the gaps when we're out of the trail.
So tip number 2 is get the local scoop. Check the local vibe. Now this could be stopping at the local bike shop, or as you can see by these trails right now, we're actually not too far from residential areas. So we were able to talk to some guys, get an idea of what loop might be the best one, get an idea of some trails that, hey, this has this techie feature, but it's not built up nice, and it's just really not worth your time. And especially when we gotta climb something, we always want the loop that's gonna give us the best bang for our buck. This is definitely tip number 2 because it's really helpful to have already learned a little bit about the trails yourself, know some of the names, know some of the routes a little bit from the map, because once people start rattling off different names and courses and you may have no idea what they're talking about, it's always nice to have a slight understanding of what the map looks like before you ask the locals.
We were about halfway up the climb, so I think it's a perfect time to go ahead and talk about tip number 3, which is getting warmed up. Obviously, warming up is important anytime you're riding, but when you're in a new spot, I think it's especially important that you make sure your legs and lungs are feeling good, you're feeling loose on the bike before you start hitting brand new features. And there's a couple ways we go about doing this. First of all, especially on new trails, we try to resist the temptation to hit the downhills first or to shuttle it and just skip any climbing. The second way we do this is by sessioning features, which just so happens to be tip 3 that we'll be talking about in just a second.
Tip number 4 is sessioning. Sessioning is actually something that both Josh and I really enjoy to do. So whether it's a climb or whether it's a technical descent or drop or jump, we love to just get out there and put it on repeat. This was the first feature we got to on this trail that both of us went up the first time and did not clean the first time. So stick around and watch us session this a couple times.
Punch, punch, punch. Yeah.
So we actually found a third line to this techie section that once you get up kind of the crux, it's 2 little drops, then you're golden. But let's see Josh do it. Yep. Nice. Go. One of the trickiest things about riding new terrain is actually getting to know the terrain, the dirt, the type of rocks. So when you're learning a new trail, if you're sessioning one feature, that's gonna help you learn the rest of the trail and feel more confident the rest of the time.
Tip number 5 is probably the most important tip that we're going to talk about today, and that's just to have fun. There's definitely a time and place for getting Strava KOMs and trying to learn new tricks or whatever it is that you're into, but the first time on a new trail is probably not the time for that. And to be honest, all the tips leading up to this really make the whole idea of having fun out there possible. Another phrase that we oftentimes keep in mind when we're riding new trails is quality over quantity. Meaning that we avoid the temptation to go out there and just ride every single trail in the network and instead focus on maybe 1 or 2 trails that the locals recommend so that we can really savor the experience and enjoy all that it has to offer.
We definitely recommend riding new trails. We think it really just makes us better riders. And I hope these tips really encourage you and help you to get out there and try new trails too.
And speaking of riding new trails, that's what you should go and do right now. Before you leave though, go ahead, leave us a comment, tell us about some of your favorite new trail experiences. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you on the trails.